All right, so everybody, welcome to the first of our manufacturing intelligence webinars at Matrix Technologies. I'm joined by several people within the division, and we have a special guest, Kevin Jones from Ectobox. So I've put our agenda up here, the things we're going to go through. So we're just going to start with some welcome and introductions. We'll get into going over some definitions and concepts. I'm a big believer in Simon Sinek. We always want to start with why. And so why we're doing the matrix transformation assessment is there's a lot of reasons before it. And I want to do so a level set real fast before we get into the actual MTA process itself, which good way segue into the actual MTA. It's questionnaire, meetings, and deliverables. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and finally wrap up with some time for some questions and answers at the end. I did want attendees to know that the chat is available, but people are not able to. We have microphones and cameras are turned off. So I believe Jim Mansfield, you're going to lead us off and just tell us a little bit about Matrix Technologies.
Thanks, David. I appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. Jim Mansfield, the Senior Manager within Matrix Technologies, and I'm proud to lead the Manufacturing Intelligence Group for Matrix. Matrix is established back in 1980. Today, 300 plus employees located in 7 locations across the United States. We're a multidiscipline engineering organization. Made up of structural, architectural, mechanical. List of discipline, chances are we have it under one roof. Services range from industrial automation information systems, manufacturing intelligence, process and facility engineering, and full EPC capabilities, along with a very strong power system analyst and design. Won't go into a lot of details, but market sectors that we represent there along the bottom: food and beverage, wine, spirits, pharmaceutical, chemical, oil and gas, consumer packaged goods, aggregates, and metals. Won't belabor this any further with Matrix and turn it back over to David and Kevin.
Thanks. All right, so real fast, I did want to give Kevin Jones an opportunity to introduce himself as well. So we've invited him, and the idea, although he is quite familiar with the process that we use, we call the MTA, we thought it'd be good to do more of a dialogue and exchange, and so we can help understand some concepts that make sure everybody is understanding what it is we're doing and why it is we're doing that. So real fast, Kevin, if you could just take a couple of minutes to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what Ectobox is about.
Sure. Thank you, Dave. So Ectobox, we're a manufacturing intelligence solutions company. Our focus is to help manufacturers. I mean, it's quite honestly, it's a lot like Matrix, to help manufacturers solve challenges like downtime, production scheduling challenges, quality production, all those kinds of things that happen in the plant floor. And we typically do that by connecting to the people, the devices, the machines, and the other software systems, pulling that data together and creating what I think of as a single version of the truth to connect everything. And we then end up creating really good solutions for companies to really be able to drive the data-driven manufacturing process, drive that digital transformation. And we're working with Matrix as a partner company, teaming up on projects like this. And we've done these kinds of processes and assessments, and so I love this kind of conversation. So I'm looking forward to it, Dave. Thanks for having us.
Glad we're here, and glad we're able to continue our conversation and our professional relationship. We've done some really great stuff out there. So,
yep,
so as I mentioned when I first got going with the call, is that we want to do a level set. We want to begin with why and start with some just definitions so people understand where we're coming from and why it is that we're approaching transformation assessments the way we do. So I have some key concepts, and there's some definitions and general concepts that we're going to get to. So starting off with the very first one, it's important for people to realize that digital transformation is a strategy. It's not a project. And why this is so important is that there have been a lot of companies and manufacturers that have tried to do some type of digital transformation effort, and they end up being these disparate transformations. And because I do a lot of work in reliability, there seems to be almost this dual track of the maintenance group is doing their digital transformation implementations, operations is doing theirs, maybe quality is doing theirs. And you end up with these systems that maybe are able to solve and provide some value for some high value targets, but all of that information they're not able to bring together in one cohesive system where they can start leveraging what was learned from one system to another system. So it's important to get everybody aligned behind a strategy. So think of digital strategy or digital transformation like the way you approach quality, or we're going to have reliability is going to be something that we do as an organization. Digital transformation is we're going to start with a strategy of what data do we have, what value can we get from it, and what is the competitive advantage that we get through accessing it. And once you have that digital strategy defined that everybody knows and understands, that's when you start using that as the basis for every decision that you make. Does that make sense, Kevin?
Yeah, I was just making a couple of notes to myself right here because I like how you were talking about maintenance has their effort, operations has their effort, and one of the things that we'll find as you go through the MTA process is that you are, and I'll add a word to it, not only building a strategy, you're building a singular strategy such that the idea comes from leadership of the organization, not just of operations or maintenance, et cetera. And so you're really kind of pulling everybody together and coordinating to drive that single strategy, which I think is a really good key there.
Yeah,
It's a good example.
Absolutely. And as a strategy person, this is just right as rain for me. So the next thing is when you're actually implementing your digital strategy or executing against that strategy, remember it's about transforming the way that you operate your business. It's not about how you're going to just go through and approach your manufacturing process. It's how you're going to manage your business, meaning all of the systems that you utilize for your manufacturing process that is creating and consuming data. You want to leverage it because there's a lot that gets produced every day, but you never consume it in real time. So as you start working that strategy, what's the data? How can we use it? What's the competitive advantage? It's getting all that information tied together and starting to present that across the organization for driving those decisions. So it's the transformation of not just your manufacturing process, it's the transformation of your business. Or another way to think of it is if you were to build your business today, starting from the ground up, blank sheet of paper, how would you design it? How would you operate it? That's the way you want to think about digital transformation.
Another thought to throw in there when we talk about manufacturers and transforming how they operate, I think a lot of people in our conversations, we have a lot of people think about, okay, we're going to transform how we address challenges around downtime or improve our quality. I actually think of those as short-term things. I'm not saying that they're not valuable. They are incredibly valuable to address all these kinds of problems that we know about that we're dealing with day in and day out. But there's also the longer-term kind of stuff, supply chain, creating better bonds with our customers, a lot of bigger company kinds of things that we're really talking about here because we are talking about how the business is going to transform and operate. So again, not just in the short term, but also in the long term as well. And that's something that I think not all companies and people get, but I wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's make sure we're all on the same page before we get too far down in the weeds with things. And then the last key concept that I want to bring up is that digital transformation, it's not continuous improvement. It's breakthrough innovation. It's changing the way you do things. And if you look at the diagram I have here, it's this lighthouse project. And where we are on this is at the bottom of that lighthouse. And we need to do something differently. So if all you're doing is just continuously improving, you're getting better at doing something that may not be the right thing. So it's stop doing it that way, do something very different. It's all about bringing together all of these business systems and presenting that data in a new way. You've started with that blank piece of paper. You've redone how your business operates. And now once you have that breakthrough innovation, then you can start continuously improving again. Sometimes I use the analogy of think of when you were a child, you continuously improved until you got to adolescence. And then you went through this remarkable change of going from a child to being an adult. It's a huge transformation of what it is as a person that you are. And then you get back into that continuous improvement where now that you're no longer a child, you're an adult or young adult at this point, you continually improve through adulthood.
That's a good analogy. I just want to throw out a quick reminder to everybody. please feel free, if you have any questions, throw them into the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat and I'll make sure that Dave answers those questions. So please, please, please do that. It'd be great to get a conversation, not just between Dave and I, but also the rest of you as well.
Sure, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about some quick definitions so we all are on the same page of what the difference between Industry 4.0 is, what digital transformation is, and what IIoT is. And it's, again, just getting us all aligned on the same page. So Industry 3.0, think of it as when the PLC was developed and manufacturers started using that. It was the automation of your manufacturing processes. And so this just created digital data. A good way to understand what Industry 3.0 is it's that PLC, but it's also maybe your process of storing, where I now have all of this data. It's time series data. Maybe it has some context, maybe it doesn't, but this is some of that data that exists in your business that you may not be consuming in real time. But that was largely what Industry 3.0 is. It was just automation. Industry 4.0, that's that digital integration of your automation and your business processes. So this is where we're going to start creating some information. So not only am I tying in what's happening on a manufacturing floor, I also know what's happening on, sometimes referred to as the carpeted side of the business. If I generate a quote, if I generate a manufacturing work order, anything that I'm doing, and let's just call it in that ERP system, your enterprise resource planning, other systems are able to utilize that same data and then create some contextual information out of that. So Industry 4.0, it's integrating your automation and your business processes. So that's just, think of it in that way. Of it's more of the movement of what's happening. It's the era of manufacturing that we're in right now. So digital transformation, that's going from manual or paper processes to these integrated digital processes. Another way to think of this is going from a lot of your clipboards and sneakernet to tablets and Ethernet. So if you have a lot of paper on your manufacturing floor, if you have job jackets or travelers or a lot of that paper that has to get shuffled around, if you are to digitize those and get them on a tablet, as well as integrating that information that's being captured there with other systems that can consume it, that's what that digital transformation is. Remember, we're creating this ecosystem of all these connected manufacturing and business processes. And then finally, go ahead, Kevin.
There's a point, and I'll just I'll show you my cell phone that probably will bring to mind the example, the kind of idea that we often talk about. Do you want to take that one, or do you want me to take that?
Oh, go right ahead.
What's the idea that if we were to stop and think about how many of us individually as people and our families have digitally transformed, all the sources of data, all the devices we're using, and all the ways that we can use these devices that really have changed our life, hopefully mostly for the better. And then we stop and look at manufacturing and how much of the manufacturers have really transformed to change how they operate. We'd be lucky to say it'd be 5 or 10%. A lot of the people in our society have converted using cell phones and all these other tools that I can do banking, I can play games, I can, call on my family and friends and all the rest of that on this device. So in our society, 90% maybe or more, and not even 5 or 10 in manufacturing. And that's the difference. And that's the gap that needs to be closed for manufacturing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great way to look at it. Is I know everything I need to know about my personal life on my phone. It's now changing to make everything that I want to know about my business on my phone, so that at any point in time, any stakeholder in the business can pull up a dashboard and take a look at how am I doing right now? What's the current state of it? I'm fully connected. All my business systems are there. I know what line is producing the very best product right now at any moment in time. Those types of things. Is there.
The same transformation that we've gone through personally, manufacturing now needs to go through.
Yeah, no, great analogy, Kevin. So finally, the industrial Internet of Things, or IIoT, that's just the ecosystem that is created when we digitally transform. So going back to the personal reference, if you think about your personal life, and if you have one of those smart appliances, we use an Alexa, it's that I can now turn on my oven, close my garage door, turn on lights. I can run a vacuum cleaner, I can check the weather, all the things that I need to do, I am digitally integrated. So all of my systems are connected through an IoT infrastructure. I now apply that exact same type of technology to my manufacturing business, manufacturing process, where all of this different information, all these different systems are now connected into one ecosystem, and they're now able to communicate, and I can present information, I can consume information from these other systems. So IIoT is just that ecosystem that's created, also with a lot more sensors. So we're going to get a lot more ability to capture data out on that manufacturing floor through this ecosystem that we weren't able to do. One other thing I'd like to point out is anytime I plug in something new to my system, I'm able to get it brought into that ecosystem for other technology to use. So it becomes very easy to enable that type of process. So all these definitions making sense, Kevin?
Yeah, they are, and they're making me really anxious to want to get into more of the digital transformation stuff because
Right.
all the ideas are there. You're really setting us up well. Yeah, that makes a ton of
Thank you.
sense.
All right, so general concepts. So now that you understand, what we're doing, what digital transformation is, what some of the different terms we're meaning are, let's just talk a little bit about what some general things to keep in mind. So the first thing, I will continue down this path and hammer on it. Know what your digital strategy is. Once you have developed what is your digital strategy, make sure everybody knows it and can recite it. It should be really easy. It should be short. It should be quick. It should be succinct. But everybody needs to know what it is so that every decision we make is going to reflect what our digital strategy is. Next thing.
The one point to add to that too, that I think this really helps with context for people. We talk about the digital strategy and the 4 rules and some of these other ideas that should be defined and accepted, approved, pushed out from leadership to the rest of the organization. They provide the manufacturers with guardrails. That's really what they do. They provide guardrails to make decisions as you go down the path, the roadmap of doing a digital transformation. It helps you make decisions that are going to keep you going down the right way, as opposed to going way off the road and buying some technology or making an acquisition that just doesn't make sense within this digital transformation strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. Next general concept is you want to approach every project as part of a larger whole. So I talked earlier about how there were these disparate transformation or IIoT or Industry 4.0 efforts that once they got done, they weren't able to connect, or I wasn't able to leverage any of that information from those systems. So if you take a look at anything you do, you should also realize that whatever I'm doing right now is going to be built upon. And I want to avoid any kind of technical debt in what it is that I'm doing. And a good way to think about it is what I do today is based on what I know today, but what I do a month from now is going to be based on what I know a month from now. Remember, we're exponentially creating new information through this digital transformation journey. And once I get to the end of some little phase, I'm going to realize, whoa, I didn't realize this was the case, and that may change what it is you're doing. So make sure you're approaching every project as part of a larger whole. You know there is going to be a next step to this. Make sure you set yourself up for that success. Third piece is make no assumptions about how the data is going to be consumed. And I used to run into this a lot in process control, where I had some smart devices that were down in a manufacturing environment, a process environment, that produced a lot more data than I was consuming. I was only really getting its primary variables. So it was a pressure or a temperature or humidity or vibration. But there was a whole slew of data that I could be capturing. The reason why I didn't get it, I don't need it. But maybe there's another process that is going to need that type of data that's going to help it. Remember, once we start getting into big data, one of the best ways to approach it, and why we call it big data, is that there's going to be patterns that exist within that data that we may not recognize as humans, and other systems will be able to do something with it. So make no assumptions how that data is going to be consumed. You want to publish as much of it out there as you can so we can start making these intelligent decisions based on all of the data that's out there. Fourth piece, treat all producers and consumers as data as nodes within an ecosystem. So I talked earlier about how we're going to integrate all of these systems together. rather than building in this and I'll get to it a little bit, a solution stack. What I want to do now is anytime that I'm producing and consuming intelligence, whether it's a sensor or whether it's my ERP, my enterprise resource planning system, I want that to be a node in this broader ecosystem. Remember, in IIoT, this is an ecosystem. We're connecting everything together. And I want all of those systems to be able to talk to one another, to be able to produce data, to be able to consume data and transform that into information. Moving right along, the next one is build a technology stack. Don't build a software solution stack. This is something that we see a lot where companies will continue to partner with a particular solution provider and build all of that in. And that's has the potential of building in some technical debt. You realize I can't take my next step because what I have right now is not going to allow me to do that. So what I want to be able to do is in this ecosystem, any system, and let's just start talking about some specifics, whether it's my manufacturing execution system or it's my SCADA system or my ERP. And there's a whole lot of systems that I now just are covered in that. I want to be able to pick and choose how I'm going about doing working on some of that technology. So MES includes OEE. It could have some track and trace. I want to have different systems that I may be able to replace with that. This is exceptionally critical when you start getting into this machine learning and artificial intelligence piece, because you're going to find that there are certain companies that do machine learning better in separate applications. So if you're able to connect those into this ecosystem, into this technology stack, you no longer have to build in that. Oftentimes these systems have been very cost prohibitive because you realize how expensive it is to do just the use case. If you could plug that into an ecosystem, you could actually have 3 different systems going after the same application, and now you can pick which one works the best. And you can do that if you've built it in a technology stack. And another aspect of that is, remember, technology continues to improve and advance. So you might find that there's a better solution down the road. We know what we're doing is going to be part of a larger whole. We want to replace it. You know, ensure that we can make that transition and make that change very quickly. Last key concept or general concept is you have to remain agile. Now, I realize that using the word agile, sometimes people think of, oh, agile project management, no, bad. No, I mean just agile in terms of how we're going to approach our digital transformation. Remember, there's a whole lot of things we don't know. As we learn new information, we're going to want to make changes to what it is we're doing. We need to be nimble. We need to be flexible. We need to be able to approach this thing of, as we go down this path, things are going to change. Things are going to be different. And we need to be able to adapt and change to those events that are occurred down the road. So just threw a whole lot of stuff at you, Kevin. Any questions, comments that you have where we are on this?
Yeah, one of the questions that's come up when I've talked with people about the fact that we were going to do this conversation, one of the things that came up was, well, what's the difference between technology stack and solution stack? It's not something that people get readily. I think one of the ideas that I'll ask you to respond more, but in short, one of the things that I think about is the finger puzzle. You know, you go to that gift shop on vacation and you'd walk in and you're playing with some of the little toys in the gift shop. And one of them is that little finger puzzle, like you stick your finger in and you can't get your finger out,
Yep.
kind of thing, creating that kind of lock-in process. And would that be a good way to describe the difference between a solution stack and a technology stack so people can really easily get this concept?
Yeah, I think another phrase that's probably common to the audience is that a solution stack is the vendor lock, meaning I've now invested in a particular vendor that I think is going to be able to handle everything. The next thing you know, you realize I can't change anything because the system either won't do what I need it to do, or there's some other cool piece of technology I'd like to introduce to my ecosystem and I can't because that solution stack won't allow me to do it. You want to choose what's with the application, what are we trying to do with this piece of technology, and then try to get that best in class, or I like to say right in class, the thing that you can support. So I think, go ahead.
It's finding the right tool for the right job is a way that I think about it. So for those companies, they might create one product that's really good and can work really well. I mean, I think you're just kind of touching on it, but some of their other products might create lock-in and exclude the ability to add in, pull out data to do this, or to be able to do this with machine learning. How do you solve that? Yeah. How
That's
do you
just,
think about that?
yeah, that's the technology stack that allows me that whatever I want to use at any layer in my automation or my business, I'm able to integrate within that ecosystem because I've used a common technology, not necessarily a common software platform or hardware platform.
Good, good, awesome.
So since we're talking a little bit about digital transformation, and we'll get into the MTA here shortly, it's that when we come in and start doing that digital transformation, the steps to doing it is start by inventorying the business. And what I mean by this is taking a look at how do you go from quote to cash or order to cash within your business? How do you as a manufacturer actually receive an order and then get that product shipped out the door? And what are all the steps in going through that process? Who are all the people that are involved? What are all the departments that are involved? What's all the technology involved? So you really want to have a good understanding of what that looks like. Now you want to inventory your intelligence. This is all the smart stuff. This is all of that automation stack. This is all of your business software, all of the software and hardware systems that you're now utilizing within that all these business processes. And that also means the people. Remember, there's a lot of knowledge that exists within your enterprise, and you want to make sure you're getting you understand who's doing what throughout your system. So that's like your scheduler, your master scheduler for all your orders. There's a lot of that's what some of the smart stuff that exists within your enterprise. Then you want to connect all that intelligence to the network. This is where we're creating that ecosystem. We're now starting to take all this intelligence and getting it put in. We're no longer using paper and sneakernet. We're now using tablets and Ethernet. This is where we get people plugged in. And now we want to create this unified namespace. And what a unified namespace is that's the single source of truth for all of your data and events, and it's the structure of your business. So we've already gone through, we understand how we go from order to cash. What are all the business processes? We know what all the smart stuff is. We've got it all brought together. Now we need to start creating what I call semantic data models. That's part of what your UNS is, so that as these systems start to produce and consume information, we all have a common understanding, a common framework for how that data is going to be structured throughout the business. And now we're going to integrate. So you design that unified namespace. Now you integrate into that unified namespace. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to consume the data, where we're going to subscribe. We're also going to publish or create information, or we're going to publish that out. And the next step is to present that information. And that's the right information at the right time to the right people in the right format. So that's what you want to present. And then finally, learn from that new knowledge. So if you think about those first 7 steps here, this is largely what's going to come through the proof of concept from our matrix transformation assessment. And remember, what we're doing today is based on what we know today. What we do 30 days from now is based on what we know then. Once we start presenting that information and learning from it, that's where now we're going to start to expand what it is we're doing based on that new knowledge. Way down in the process, I talked earlier about adding some machine learning and some artificial intelligence. Way late in your process before you want to start doing that. You have to get your foundation built first. You don't build your house by putting in your hot tub first. You want to have the foundation, that basement. You want to get it poured. You want to get it level. You want to get it set right so that everything else you build on top of that, you're now going to be able to leverage. Once you now have the AI ML integrated, you'll want to learn from that and then just continuing to iterate. So this is a great little picture on what it is we're doing. So it's inventory business intelligence, connect it, integrate it, present the information, learn, and then just continue to expand and continue to iterate. And then finally, when you're in that end state and you've done all this, everything and everyone is connected. Remember, all of our intelligence, it's not just technology, it's the people. We're now all connected. All of the layers of the business are integrated. So everything that exists on the carpeted side of the business, on the concrete side of the business, all of those systems are fully integrated, producing and consuming information. Stakeholders know the current state. We talked earlier about everything is on my phone. I can look and know the current state of my business. Utilizing some of these the advanced the machine learning and AI, I can now know the future state of my business and make adjustments. So as I mentioned here, machine learning predicts. It's using patterns to predict future behaviors, whether it's knowing that your batch is not going to meet quality, stop now, or run the asset this way so we can get to that next outage or that next turnaround type of thing. And then the artificial intelligence makes recommendations on those processes. And finally, the stakeholders are executing. So once we get to that end state, we've done all this. That's what sometimes is called the Holy Grail. So any questions on this? Again, it's a whole big data dump, but I promise you we're moving to the next phase here.
And one of the things that come to mind, we've actually seen this with some recent conversations for a company that has about 15 to 20 plants, is that they tried some siloed, small little proofs of concept projects, which made a lot of sense. And they were using AI in those. Grab data from here, move it up, then throw it into a good, quite honestly, it's a good AI tool to try to drive some value. And they were able to drive some value. But then they did 2 or 3 of those, and then leadership stepped back and said, this is not scalable. This doesn't work. And so they're actually stepping back to start at the top of the process. Inventory the business. How do we operate at all levels? Inventory the intelligence. How do we want to work, et cetera? And then putting together unified namespace and connecting things, et cetera. And so that's where they're at now. They're starting to develop. They have already internally, really interesting. They've already internally developed a digital strategy, and it's a good one. And defined the rules they're going to use and giving themselves the guardrails, if you will. And they're now starting down this journey, and I can see them having so much more success with this kind of guardrails and knowing where they're going to go, and leadership having recognized, yeah, this onesie twosie little kind of process isn't going to work. We need to take a more planned and thoughtful approach. And they went through and did their own internal assessment. It was really good.
Excellent. Makes a huge difference when everybody gets aligned.
Huge. Absolutely.
Yeah. So the moment everybody's been waiting for, let's start talking about what the matrix transformation assessment is. So thank you for your patience, but I can't stress enough, we all need to understand the why and some of the what's before we get into the how. So when we start working against our manufacturing transformation assessment, and we've come to the manufacturer, we've had conversations, what does that actual process look like? Well, the first thing we do is this 23-point questionnaire. And what that allows us to do is across 10 different dimensions. So we're going to have a column for strategy, something we're going to take a look at. How developed is your strategy? Do you have one? That's going to be a low score versus you have a fully digital strategy. That's going to be a high score. Same thing with operations. How integrated is your overall operations? How do you do things? What type of technology do you have out there? If you have very little technology, if it is fully paper and you really don't have much but a stack on somebody's desk for how we actually manufacture our process, that's going to be a lower score. But if you have a fully integrated where now, at least from a manufacturing standpoint, all the technology is connected together, that's going to be a higher score. And what we're using across these 10 dimensions is what we want to come up with is where are you in terms of a digital maturity, which is one of the deliverables we'll get to. But that goes out ahead of the process or ahead of the meetings that we'll have on site, and that we want to try to get as many people to respond to that questionnaire, because just like I mentioned with big data, the more data points we have, the better we can assess and score and understand where are you now as a manufacturer, where are you on your transformation journey. So this is a very a critical piece and something we do ahead of time. The results are presented in that. Once we get into the meetings, this is typically about a week-long process. So the meetings themselves are about 2.5 hours. That's what they're scheduled for. And we want to meet with 5 different groups within your organization. Generally, there's engineering and maintenance that we will want to work with. We want to talk with operations, the people that are actually needing the manufacturing. We want to talk with quality. And you'll notice that many of these departments or these groups that we work with, as I mentioned earlier, all had their disparate efforts that they did. We want to get everybody aligned on this. We want to work with the IT group to understand how they are involved in this digital transformation, because we are talking technology. We're bringing together a lot of different information or all these different systems. We want to ensure that they are a part of that conversation so IT understands how everything is getting connected. And then finally, leadership. So from those 5 groups, this is what we're going to utilize to understand at a deeper level what's happening within that manufacturer. And that's where we start to align on that digital strategy. We'll also schedule breakout sessions. Those are 90 minutes. And that's if there's something that's learned in any one of these other sessions that we need to spend a little more time understanding of, or maybe there's some disagreement on, say, how our OEE system works and how we calculate that. Maybe that's something we'll want to spend a little more time on. So those are the meetings. So some questions that you'll get that are common throughout all of these sessions are things that you're good at. So what does your department do really well? And we want to understand, where are all the strengths within the business? And then, of course, on the same side, we like to talk about what are you guys not so good at? What continues to be a challenge within within these departments that maybe presents itself to the broader organization of, it takes, a certain amount of time to get, a certain task done type of thing. We're just not good at doing that. And then we'll also get into some specific questions. So think within the maintenance group, how do you guys calculate your MTBR? That's your mean time between repair. And that just becomes a very specific data point that we use just to understand sort of where that maintenance maturity is as well. Or within quality, do you guys use statistical process control? Is this something? Do you have those control charts that now tell you how to adjust your process? And reflecting earlier on that 23-point questionnaire, it's really just having understanding for where are you on your technology maturity, which speaks to where are you on your digital transformation journey. So any questions on the meetings or some of the things that companies put into this assessment, Kevin?
Yeah, there are a couple of things that are coming up. One is there's 3 of them. I don't know where to start. Leadership doesn't have time for all these meetings. It's that kind of approach. What are your thoughts? I have a couple thoughts, but please.
Yeah, so if leadership doesn't have time for that would be a concern, because remember, we're developing a digital strategy. This is how you're going to compete in a global manufacturing environment. And if you understand what your digital strategy is, that'll lend itself through across the entire enterprise. So if you look at, I do a lot of Patrick Lencioni. He is a thought leader around leadership and management. There's several books that he has out there. I think the just 5 dysfunctions of a team is good. The advantage is one of them, but he will even speak leadership. It is your responsibility to lead your company to that next whatever you guys are doing. So it's incumbent upon you to lead that transformation for that. So I would suggest it's 2.5 hours. It's only the future of your company. Perhaps you should make some time for this.
But you hit the nail on the head there too at the last couple points. One, it's only the future of your company, and also it's only 2.5 hours. That's the last point specifically I also wanted to get to. Like, let's be practical about it. The leadership, C-suite, all the VPs, global VPs, et cetera, don't need to attend to all of the meetings, but they do need to be there for 2 or 3 of them. The launch of the project, the leadership meeting, and the review at the end, and developing that digital strategy. It's not a huge ask, and well, as you said, it's only the future of your company,
Right.
So yeah, makes sense.
All right. So the deliverable that you get from this, and this is going to be one of the differences that we have is how we're looking at it, is we're taking a very practical approach to how we're going to develop that digital strategy. So I mentioned earlier, from that assessment, we're going to give you that maturity score on a 3.0 to 4.0 scale. We have had some companies joke that, yeah, we're more like a 2.5. We're not even automated. And well, you at least get a minimum 3.0. It gives you a good starting point for where you are. So minimum score, you're at least going to get a 3 to a fully 4.0 company. I do want to point out some of the best manufacturers in the world are scoring. There's a data set of about 1,800 different companies that have been reviewed. The best score within that data set is a 3.8. So if you're looking for that company that's a fully 4.0, I have some bad news for you. There isn't one yet, but more and more companies will get there. I think the average starting point, and this is based on that 10-pillar assessment, is about a 3.4. So it gives you an idea of where you are. And that maturity score is both in the overall data set as well as the similar companies or comparable companies within your market segment. The next thing you'll get is a digital strategy, or at least a sample statement. As I mentioned earlier, your digital strategy, it's 3 lines. It can be something like, what data do we have? How are we going to use it? What's our competitive advantage? Or something along those lines that we want to utilize. That's the digital strategy, something that everybody knows that you use to drive all decisions for your digital transformation journey. Next thing is that minimum technical requirement. So we talked earlier about wanting to build a technology stack, not a solution stack. And this is where you're going to put in that everything that we get from a technology is going to be able to do this. It's going to be able to plug into this ecosystem. It's going to provide this basic kind of functionality. We're also going to give you a potential roadmap. This is that long-term plan. Sometimes we talk about there's a 5-year plan, a 3-year plan. So this is overall when we're done doing this thing. And that kind of starts from that. If we were to redo the business today, how would we build it up? Kind of brings in some of that information. At least gives you an idea of where we're going on this particular journey, knowing that that might change, because we realize once new information is presented, that's going to change. And then finally, it's the proof of concept. What we want to get from all of these breakout meetings is a problem that exists throughout the entire enterprise, that if we can just start with this proof of concept, this one problem, and solve that, it's going to help get everybody on the journey. It's sometimes called low-hanging fruit. Sometimes we're just bringing in, gosh, can you at least just connect up my machine so I can look at what they're doing? It can be something as simple as that. Or can you get rid of our all this paper? Can you at least help us get rid of that? So we're at least digitizing the travelers, those types of things that are out there. And that's what the deliverable looks like, typically about 25 pages. And, last piece of information on all this is, these things are digital transformation succeed because you have the right technology, you have the right partner, and you have the right strategy. I can't say enough. Strategy is going to be so important for your digital transformation. Kevin, any thoughts, comments on that?
A few others and a couple questions that have come up as well. Not only the right strategy, giving you those guardrails to go down that roadmap, literally, but also the right technology versus technology stack versus solution stack. And then also, the reason we're here as well, this is why we do it, the right partner. Picking the right partner that understands all these kinds of concepts is a really good point too. I think it might be worth a couple minutes conversation to step back. So you got into and you presented a lot of the details of the MTA, the whole process. Why? Why do it? Start with why. Simon Sinek, just like you said at the beginning.
Yeah.
Let's cover that again, because I think it would be really important. And I think a lot of it was in that inventory, the business inventory, the intelligence, and all the rest of that. Like, why?
So think of a digital strategy as a journey. So say I wanted to come visit you, Kevin, and I'd say, Kevin, how do I get to your house? What are you going to ask me?
When you're going to go?
Well, you're going to ask, where are you?
How are you going to get here?
Yeah. Where? Well, that's what I'm asking you, right? So you're going to ask, well, where am I? Well, no, just tell me how to get there. How do I get to your house?
Sorry. Yes, you're right.
Yeah, you have to know where I'm starting from. And so that's what this process is doing for me, is that starting with the why is, it starts with the understanding, where are you on your journey? What are some of the very simple things you can do, just the very easy steps, the low-hanging fruit to get started, knowing that once we get to the end destination of this journey, remember I talked earlier about what this Holy Grail looks like, where everything and everyone is connected and all of the layers are integrated, and we've developed all these integrated business systems. If I know what that looks like, it makes it a lot easier to take a look or to start this journey with knowing we're going to get some quick, easy wins right away. And these are a low investment win. I can't, I guess I didn't say that earlier, but we're not talking a lot of investment to get started. We generally try to do these in about a 30-day sprint, if you will, for it.
Yeah. So where you're at, where you want to go, and then finally at that point you can determine how to get there, and it doesn't take a ton of time.
Absolutely. And we need to help manufacturers become data-driven organizations. You start taking a look at some of the top companies out there, they are data companies. As a manufacturer, you need to be a data company that just happens to make blank.
Yeah. Well, one of the other things that has come up is, okay, so we've talked about leadership. I don't have time for this, but now we've talked about, well, it's only the future of your company, and it's really not that huge a time investment for leadership. What about for the rest of the team? We can't take out a whole bunch of middle managers for the process. What does it look like for these meetings? Can you dig into that a little bit more? Because what we often get, even just this morning, got an email from a company talking about a project. What's the time commitment for our team? I respect that question. That's a really good
Absolutely.
question, because
Yeah,
they've got a ton of other things to be solving. So
yeah, and as I mentioned earlier, they're typically scheduled for 2.5 hours, which is a huge commitment. And similar to that 23-point questionnaire, there's, I would say, 20-ish questions, 25 questions that or that are included in that, and we already know what those are coming in, and that's where we're going to spend our time. It's helping us understand. Remember, we're inventorying the business, so we're trying to understand, how does the quality department do what it does? How does operations do what it does? And what is all the technology that is part of that? So think of it as a mini inventory business, inventory intelligence for these various groups. And that's what will come in, and in that deliverable, we compile all that information so we can look for common themes throughout all of those. But yes, it is a time commitment, but it's so important to get started down the journey, knowing where you are.
So, how many people in those meetings as well, typically?
Typically there's, half a dozen, maybe 10. It just depends on how large the site is. Sometimes there's just 3 or 4. It all depends on the size of the manufacturing plant, but typically there's going to at least be some directors within the maintenance and the operations. There's going to be your line supervisors, superintendents, that level throughout. But it's really, go ahead.
So we found effective 2 to 5 people, typically, some more if they want to bring people on board, but on board to these ideas, let's say, but 2 to 5. And there's another good point too that's come up in some of the conversations, again, in talking with people about this conversation we're going to have here today. And it was actually one of the questions that I received too. There are, I'm going to see if I can find it here. There likely will be some resistance from people with political agendas, kingdoms to protect. And I'll add to, how do we handle that? And I'll add to that too, there are people who don't want Big Brother and all those other kinds of things. How do you work with that?
Yeah, so it's interesting you bring that up. So another one of Patrick Lencioni's books, and I'm not here to promote him, it just happened to be fitting. One of them is called Politics, Turf Silos and Turf Wars. And so, yeah, there are always going to be people that have a political agenda, and you have to understand what the motivation and what driving that person is. So we've talked about with automation, sometimes it's, automation is going to kill jobs. And we need to assure people that no, that's not what this does. It's the automation is actually going to produce higher value jobs. So you're not doing these mindless tasks. You're actually doing something that helps contribute, and you need to become more of an analyst. I mean, people who have been working on a plant floor for years, they're some of the best people and brightest people you have within the organization, because they know they have a lot of that tacit knowledge that exists without the organization. You want to ensure that whatever you're doing in this digital transformation is empowering those people to help facilitate this transformation journey and make it better. So it's like dealing with politics at any level, understanding what's doing it. One of the takeaways from that particular book is he used a hospital as one of them. Think of it as a patient has just arrived at the ER. We're not going to get involved in politics of whose job it is. What we have somebody that's now injured. We need to provide them care.
Yeah, come together and let's take care of the challenges. I like the point you made about finding their motivation. Something that I've learned a lot and taken that lesson really deeply is make sure that you understand what their motivations are and then work with them. So that you know how to work with them. What are they trying to achieve? And then let's figure out how we can do it together.
Okay.
One of the other conversation that I had with a team of people of a pretty good sized manufacturer, and this actually happened last week. It was almost word for word. I don't need someone to tell me I'm already blind. I already know that.
Right.
But okay, it's good. first of all, he recognizes it. But then second, he wanted to create a plan. So then he's then going about it with an approach to go to an engineering firm to work with him. And they're getting into the plans, talking about networks and PLCs and this and that and the other. And I think there's something missing there. And that's this whole idea of stepping back and understanding where's the business at, the inventory, the manufacturer, the business, in the inventory, the intelligence, and then kind of go from there to create the strategy and the guardrails and all that kind of stuff. That kind of stuff is missing in this approach, and we're part of the project, and we'll see where the conversation goes. But I really liked that expression. I don't need somebody to tell me blind that I'm blind. I already know that. But then the question is, then what?
Yeah, when I did strategy in school, we talked about the SWOT analysis, and SWOTs are great, except that it doesn't really tell you anything. Said, okay, great. Now I know what these are. And now what do I want to do? It's lacking that strategy element. And that's exactly what it is we want to do in this transformation assessment is, okay, yes, we can all agree that, you don't have sight. Okay, great. Now, how are we going to help you move forward in what it is that you want to do?
So one of the other questions, pretty straightforward. I think this will be an easy one. What's the next when is the next webinar, and what's the topic?
Yeah, well, let's get down here to the bottom. So if you do have some questions or if you have more information, please reach out to Jim Mansfield. He was at the very beginning of this. He is our fearless leader within the Manufacturing Intelligence Division of Matrix. You can also reach out to John Lee. He is another one of the department managers within manufacturing intelligence. So webinar number 2, it's going to be how Matrix Manufacturing Intelligence team balances agile and traditional execution methodologies. That is going to be July 27th at 1 p.m. Eastern, and there's a little overview of what it is that we're going to do. So I did mention earlier, you want to remain agile. Well, same thing does apply to how we're going to do our project management. Are we going to use waterfall? Are we going to use agile? Are we going to use something in between? And more often than not, it's something in between. We want to know what it is we're trying to do and what works the best for what we're doing. So we are at the end of this. Were there other questions or anything that anybody else had that we still needed to cover?
That's the questions that I've been able to find so far. So that's everything.
All right, so that's all I had for that. Jim, did you want to come back in and provide any parting thoughts, comments, words?
Oh, just guys, great dialogue today. I think as our clients begin to focus on the fourth industrial revolution, it's important that they get a good understanding from soup to nuts, top to bottom, start to a pseudo finish, as in it's a journey. It's very seldom ever finished, right? So thank you both. Great job, and I absolutely have nothing to add at this point.
All right, very good. Well, with that, let's go ahead and close up the webinar. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Please note our next webinar will be July 27th. We appreciate everybody's time and participating. And if there's some follow-up thoughts or questions that you have, please reach out to any one of us, and we'll be happy to help you out. So thank you, everybody, for your time today.
Great. Thank you. Take care.